1989, somewhere over the Atlantic. The airline asks the man in seat 3A one polite question. How much do you think you paid for this? He thinks. He gives a number, and he guesses high, higher than the price on his own ticket. Somebody writes that answer down. From that morning, the price of this seat climbs every year for the next 14 years. And the cabin never empties. 1997, London Heathrow, 10:30 in the morning. Flight BA1. Diane, 12 years with this airline, picked for this aeroplane out of the whole fleet, 100 seats. 3 hours, 25 minutes to New York, and a full restaurant served in the air. Today, you work her shift, and I open the invoice for one of those seats. At the landing, you answer one question. Are you richer than the people she serves today, or poorer? So start with the obvious suspect, the chair. 2 seats each side of an aisle too narrow for a catering trolley, so there is no trolley on board at all. Your window is the size of your palm. The cushion is 44 centimeters wide, the same as economy on any jet today. You moan about your budget airline seat. That was the width of the most expensive chair in the sky. So where did that price start? When the supersonic crossing opened, nobody knew what to charge, so they copied first class and added 20%. 20, a fare priced almost apologetically, about $900 one way. Call it $4,800 today. The old fare tables argue, so take the shape, not the decimal. It is the bottom step of a staircase we climb for the rest of this flight. 9:55. A truck lifts a box into the side of the aeroplane, and Diane signs for it. Inside, 100 dinners, real bone china, and champagne the airline buys far cheaper than you can. Everything for the next 3.5 hours is in that box. There is no second delivery at twice the speed of sound. And the clock on the galley wall is the only thing here that is not going faster. Before the doors close, let's do what we always do. Pull up her payslip. Gross for senior cabin crew in 97, 15 to 18,000 pounds a year, flying allowances on top. Now the deductions. Uniform, training done in her own time, tax, and the hours before the passengers arrive, which somehow are not hours. Take home, about 1,100 pounds a month, roughly 2,300 in today's money. That is the invoice nobody prints. One number before we fly, then I leave it alone. In 1984, this airline bought something from its own government for £16.5 million. Not a building, not a route. Hang on to that number. Once the invoice is open, I will tell you what it bought. And that apologetic $900 fare will read very differently. 10:30, reheat. 4 engines come up together, the cabin leans back, and people who fly every week still laugh out loud on the roll because nothing else in aviation does that. Now you are Diane, 100 passengers, canapes in 20 minutes, one aisle you cannot turn round in, and a full restaurant to serve before New York. That galley clock does not care. Go. Suspect 2, the fuel. This airplane drinks about 25 tons an hour at cruise, roughly a ton of kerosene for every passenger crossing the Atlantic. So guess what slice of the ticket that is? Higher. Everyone guesses higher. Wrong. Go lower. At 97 prices, it is around $200 a head, 5% of the fare. The thing everybody blames for the price costs less than the taxi to the airport. Cruise. The champagne in your glass does not ripple. You are doing 2,000 kilometers an hour, and the surface is dead flat. Put your palm on the window. It is warm. Outside, the nose skin runs near 127 degrees, and the airplane stretches 25 centimeters in flight, longer while you eat your starter than it was on the ground. A dial on the wall reads Mach 2.0. Everybody photographs the dial. Nobody photographs the lobster. So how do you run a restaurant out of a cupboard? One small oven, so the first course has to be cold. So, canapes and caviar, never soup. Dry cabin air kills 1/4 of your sense of taste. Delicate food dies. Salt survives. The plates are thin bone china because they are light, and every kilo is kerosene. That menu was not written by a chef. It was written by a weight sheet. Time to kill a myth, and for once, it lands in her favor. You have heard this job was glamour. Pour the champagne, smile, land in New York. Open the timetable instead. A full restaurant for 100 people in 3 hours and 25 minutes. One aisle, no second run at anything. Crew were picked out of the whole airline, like a pit crew. Hardest cabin job in flying, sold to the public as a smile. Suspect 3, the famous one, the dinner. A tin of Iranian caviar, a bottle of vintage champagne, a lobster. Surely that is where the money went. Price it from a high street shop in 97. Call it £100 a head, about $250 in modern money. Under 5% of the seat. The most photographed dinner of the century was the cheapest thing on the tray, and it still cost more than Diane earned carrying it. Do this sum with me, because it is the one that makes it visible. $4,000 one way, 205 minutes in the air. That is $20 a minute, $40 a minute at today's prices. Dinner runs about 90 minutes, so by the time the plates are cleared, you have sat through $1,800 of seat and eaten 100 pounds of food. And nobody remembers the lobster. So what was the money actually buying? Out of London at 10:30 in the morning, into New York at 9:25 the same morning. You land before you took off, fly home that evening, and you sleep in your own bed. Against a normal flight, that is about 8 hours handed back to you. Nobody bought speed for the thrill of it. They were buying a calendar. Now the number you came for, 97. London to New York and back, supersonic. About $8,000, roughly 16 grand now. Same day, same route, same terminal. Economy is 500 or 600. Same city, same afternoon, same ocean. 13 to 20 times the money for 4 hours saved. And still, nobody in that cabin knows what the person beside them paid. So who was actually paying? Almost never the person in the seat. The bill went to his employer, a corporate finance office signing off travel it never looked at. That is what the question in 3A had uncovered. The passenger did not know the price because it was not his money. So the airline did the boldest thing here. It started lifting the fare a little every year, waiting for the cabin to thin out. It never thinned because the man who signed it had already done his own sum, and it is uncomfortably sane. 8 hours back on the round trip. A London partner in 97 billing his clients $300 or $400 an hour. Call it £3,500 of his own time, roughly $7,000 today. Plus, walking into the meeting able to think. The seat never had to be worth it to you, only to his employer. New era, new payslip. And I keep hoping the person doing the work keeps the money. Look who sits down at this table first. Not the captain, the tank. 25 tons an hour takes its share before anyone has poured a drop. Then the hangar takes a share. Then the one factory still making spare parts. The middleman always shows up. And at twice the speed of sound, he still gets there first. Put the two invoices in one photograph. Diane walks up that aisle with about £250,000 of one-way fares sitting in the chairs either side of her in one narrow tube. One of those round trips is 4 months of her take-home. She carries trays through it, paid exactly the same whether the cabin is full of bankers or empty. One line from the engineering side. Takeoff weight, about 185 tons. Payload, people, bags, dinner, everything you actually flew to move, about 13 tons. Do that division. For all that money, the passenger was 7% of the aeroplane. The other 93% existed to move him quickly. No airline sells that ratio today. That is not nostalgia. That is arithmetic. So where is the profit? A crossing paid for itself at roughly 45 of the 100 seats. That opening fare finally doing the job it was priced for. Everything above that was margin, and the front cabin was usually full. Against it, something like 18 hours of maintenance for every hour in the air. Fill the cabin, and it prints money. Half fill it, and the same aeroplane eats you alive. Now the column nobody advertises. In '62, they estimated development at £70 million. The bill came in near $1.3 billion. Call it $10 billion in today's money. 20 aeroplanes were built. 14 ever carried a paying passenger. 1,400 supersonic seats to split that bill between. You were shown the caviar. Read the ledger under it. This chair was paid for before anybody sat in it, and it was paid by people who would never sit in it. The 25th of July, 2000, Paris. One takeoff, and 113 people did not come home. I am not going to walk you through it. Then the autumn of 2001 emptied the front cabin. This seat needed 45 passengers and was getting 20. The fare had nowhere left to climb. The people who paid it had stopped flying. The maintenance bill did not shrink to match. Diane worked that cabin to the last one. On the 24th of October 2003, the last commercial supersonic flight landed. Nobody has flown one since. So, the number I promised you at the start. By 2003, that round trip was around $12,000, $21,000 now for a chair the width of a bus seat and a window the size of your hand. They lifted the price every year until it sat where the passenger stopped noticing. Not the caviar, not the kerosene. It was that number I asked you to hang on to. 4 hours of your life handed back. That was the product. And the last line of all, that number. £16.5 million is what this airline paid its own government in '84 for all 7 of its supersonic aeroplanes. One of them had cost about $23 million to build. By its own figures, the airline cleared $30 to $50 million a year in the 90s. One good year bought the fleet twice, and every diner at that table burned a 1/4 ton of kerosene before the starter arrived. So the tally. Their side, 4 hours handed back on every trip, and a dinner they never paid for. Her side, one of those chairs cost 4 months of her take-home. Your side, you crossed the same ocean for about $1,000, and your window is bigger. One line belongs to all of us. That dinner cannot be bought now at any price. The only luxury I have audited that got dearer by vanishing. Richer than them or poorer? The comments are open. Subscribe. The one line in this ledger nobody takes a cut of. And if you enjoyed watching a luxury turn out to be an engineering document, there is a day on this channel where a doctor walked into a plague town in a beak mask and was paid by the month to do it. His middleman wore a bishop's ring. I read the invoices and I read the comments too.